Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good evening, or depending on your time zone, good afternoon, and welcome to Kaplan's free SAT Bootcamp. Just to make sure that everyone's technology is functioning and you're feeling all right, let me know in the chat, which should be somewhere on the screen next to the video player. How are you doing? How is life treating you today as we get up bright and early this afternoon or morning or evening for some SAT prep? Got Luna, who is here. Welcome aboard, Luna. Good to see you here. Rihanna's joining us. Wonder J asks, what are we doing today? We are going to look at some reading problems, some writing problems, and some math problems from the SAT. Now, obviously, in 1.5 hours, I cannot teach you every single thing you need to know, but this will be a good starting point to help you understand what kinds of things you can work on to improve your score by test day. A lot of you guys are saying hi in the chat earlier as some of our off-camera teachers were joining us in the chat. Laura and Chasen are SAT instructors just like me. You can think of them today as your private tutors. If you ever have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask them in the chat. Amy says, oh my God, are you the barbecue star guy? Yes, I can't do them in this platform. The recipe is different in different places, but that would be me. I don't know how you know that, but I'm tickled to see that. We see Bella's asking, great, how am I? Thank you so much for asking, Bella. I am doing phenomenally. I do love teaching some SAT. And of course, it's done pretty early today, so the rest of the day off is just me and my wife and my 1-year-old, so it's going to be a good old time. So welcome, everybody. Glad to see that you guys are in high spirits. Let's go ahead and get right to cracking. So here's our agenda. We're going to start with a short overview of the SAT. I'm not going to spend too much time on this part of it, but I do want to let you know just like the format of the test. I think it's very important to know that. People underestimate it, but truly, if you know like how many questions are on the section, how much time you have, how many passages there are, how many questions there are per passage, like that knowledge takes away uncertainty, and taking away uncertainty takes away anxiety. A lot of times confidence is just knowing what you're getting into. And so the more that you know what's up ahead, the more that you feel in control. Now, the bulk of today's session is definitely going to be this part here where we discuss strategies for tackling SAT problems. At the end, we'll spend a little bit of time also on tips for success. And those of you who are thinking of maybe doing a Kaplan class at some point, I'll briefly discuss what your different options are there. Okay, so with that in mind, let's go ahead and begin with a quick overview of the SAT. As you probably know, since you did decide voluntarily to join us on a Saturday and do SAT prep when you could have been, playing Animal Crossing or taking a nap or doing whatever else, the SAT is pretty important. I don't want to overstate the importance of the SAT. The most important thing truly is your GPA. As you can see, this blue pile, low high school GPA, that is individually the biggest application killer. It's not more than half, but it does have a plurality in this pie chart, which is data that we collected back in 2012. But most of you are juniors and seniors. We know that from the poll that you so helpfully voted in before the class began. Thank you so much for getting your results in there. Juniors and seniors don't have a whole lot of control over their GPA. And if you're a senior, like you are now ending your senior year, your GPA is already locked in. If you're a junior, then you've really only got like one more semester that you're in control of, which is next fall. Most schools don't really consider the spring semester of your senior year. And I'm assuming whatever school is left this year, you don't have that much control over your grades at this point. Midterms have already passed and a lot of your grades been locked in. I mean, you do have control over your finals, but your GPA is the biggest factor in applying to college, but most of it's already been determined. The SAT, which is this olive pie chart here, or sorry, this purple pie chart here, the low SAT or ACT score, that is something over which you have full control. So your overall GPA and your grades in college prep courses, meaning things other than like a band or like basket weaving that you took, these are the biggest individual pieces, but they're locked in. Your SAT or ACT score, that is fully in your control right now, which is why that is now the most important thing to focus on. Now, we do usually have, and let me know in the chat, is anyone here, that crazy freshman or sophomore who was just like hopping in early, like, hey, what's up, guys? I haven't taken algebra yet, but let's see what's cracking on the SAT. If you are a sophomore or a freshman, the most important thing is to work on your grades. That's like number one, the most important thing. So if prepping for the SAT would sacrifice your GPA, it's not a good trade-off right now. Although you can like take the SAT in the summer, for example, and then that's totally fine. But if you're a junior or a senior, then yeah, this is the main thing you should focus on right now because it's going to have the biggest impact on your chances of actually getting into college. Now, there's a great question from Elise. What is considered a safe GPA? And the answer to that question is the same as the answer to the question, what's considered a good good SAT score, which is it depends. Look, if you're applying to Yale, that's going to have a very different answer than if you're applying to, Oberlin. And that's going to have a very different answer than if you're applying to, like your local private school. So you have to first look at schools that interest you and figure out roughly where you want to go, at least get a sense of the kind of schools you might apply to. And then for those schools, figure out, okay, what does this school consider a good GPA? What does this school consider a good score, and so on. Oh, hey, quite a few of you. Wow, quite a few of you are sophomores and freshmen. Great. So if you're going to prep, that's amazing. Seriously, like do it this summer, get an awesome SAT score and move on with your life. Future you is going to be so happy because when you're a senior and juggling 4 AP classes and also trying to sneak in SAT prep, you're going to hate life, but your friends are going to be doing that. Meanwhile, you're going to be laughing at them because you spent your summer after sophomore year getting the SAT taken over with, and now you can just focus on your schoolwork and just have a much easier time of it. So I salute you, but please know the SAT and ACT are not as important as GPA for getting into college, which is why you only want to prep for the SAT, ACT when the GPA is mostly locked in and when you wouldn't be sacrificing any of it to get your prep done. Okay, so now let's talk about the structure of the SAT. So first up is always reading. You're going to have 65 minutes to answer 52 questions. These 52 questions are going to be split across 5 passages. Now, it's not shown here in this table, but just so you know, the 5 passages will be 1 literature passage, 2 history/social studies passages, and 2 science passages. One of these 4, so not the literature passage, but one of these 4 passages, the social studies/history/science, is actually going to be a pair of passages. Now, if you do the math, 52 does not divide nicely into 5. So what's going to happen is that 3 of the passages will have 10 questions and 2 will have 11. Yeah, and just like good to know that technical stuff so that you feel in control of what's coming up on test day. After reading comes writing and language. You're going to have 4 passages, 44 questions. So this is nice. It's just 11 questions per passage. These are typically quicker, so you have like almost half as much time for that. This is typically for many people not the scariest section, although if it is your scariest section, that's great because it's the easiest section to improve on. Learn how semicolons work, which you will today, and congratulations, your writing score is higher. Piece of cake. Now math. That's broken up into 2 sections. 25 minutes to answer 20 questions without a calculator, 15 of which are multiple choice and 5 of which are grid-ins. And then you're going to have almost an hour to answer 38 questions, which will be 30 multiple choice and 8 grid-ins. A couple things to note here. Let me know in the chat, how nervous are you about having 20 questions to answer without a calculator? Anybody feeling some jitters about that? If you are, I have some good news. The SAT will never ask you really arithmetically complicated questions in the non-calculator portion of the SAT. So if you have to answer some weirdo thing like, what is 5.38 times 77? You are not going to see that on the non-calculator. That it's guaranteed to show up on the calculator portion of the SAT. So like if like you guessed 8221, you're nervous about it, don't be, because if you feel like reaching for a calculator on the non-calculator portion, what that really means is you should skip the problem. There's always a trick. I 100% guarantee it. There is always some kind of a trick that makes that problem solvable without having to do any really painful brute force arithmetic like long division or multiple digit multiplication. It's never required. So if you are nervous, good. That's the thing. You can just decide to wipe off your nervous platter, skip the questions that seem like they need a calculator, come back to them later and look for the trick. And if you're not nervous, great. You shouldn't be. So I'm glad to hear that you are already not that nervous about it. Okay, then we have the optional essay. And for the optional essay, let me know in the chat, like yes, no, maybe. Are you planning on taking this thing? We're not going to do it today. And I'll explain why we're not doing it today. But I do want to chat about it briefly because I know there's always some people who are interested in this thing. So the thing about the optional essay is this. To put it nicely, colleges just don't care that much. They just don't. The SAT tries to make them care. The SAT is like, hey guys, we have an essay. You want to care about the essay, guys? It's really nice. If we made it 50 minutes, we made it really hard. Like college is like, no, we don't care. Sorry. So most schools don't even require you to have your essay on the SAT. Some schools will say they recommend it. If they do, you really should take it. That just shows, some diligence in the application process. But it's not important. So what you need to do is, even if you are taking it, focus the bulk of your time on the reading, the writing, and the math, because those actually matter. Colleges actually care about those. The essay does not contribute to your score out of 1600. It's scored separately, and it's not that big of a deal, even for the colleges that require a recommended. They basically want to see that you didn't just like totally suck at the essay. So as long as you can like get in the upper half of the scoring scale, that's mostly fine. Mostly fine. If you get a really great score, that can maybe be a tiebreaker, maybe, but not that big of a deal. So this is not something to stress about. You just want to make sure that you're not getting a terrible score here. It's not like English, math, and reading where you really want to get a great score. For writing, not terrible is fine. That being said, another thing to consider, if those of you thinking like maybe like Joy was saying, she'll probably do the essay. Some folks are also not quite sure, are they going to take it? If you've done your school research, like if you know exactly which schools you're applying to, then check them. Just check to see if any of them actually require or recommend it. If none of them either require or recommend the essay, then you don't need to take it. They're not going to lie to you and say they don't care and then care like, oh, we're going to tell kids we don't care about the essay, but secretly, no, they would let you know if they actually cared at all. So don't take it if none of your schools require it. Now, if you haven't finished, your school research, so you don't know yet if you're, which schools you're applying to, it's a good idea to take it and just get a not terrible score on it to keep your options open, because it'd be super annoying to later find the school of your dreams and not be able to apply because you just didn't feel like taking the SAT essay, back in 2020. So keep your options open if you've not finished doing all your school research. All right, folks. So that is it for our little look at SAT structure. Let's finish up with scoring, because people always ask about scoring. And this is, again, dependent on what school you're applying to. So it's not going to be the same for everyone. But the main thing you need to know is this. A 1080 is the median. That means that you are higher than about 50% of your competitors. And I think a lot of people are surprised just like how little you have to do to get a pretty competitive score. Like if you look at this part of the table, all right, an overall 1130 is in the 60th percentile. You're beating 60% of your fellow high school students all across America with an 1130. If you can get up to 1250, you're in the top 20% of high school students nationwide. And with a 1340, you can actually teach for Kaplan. So I know people are always like, oh, I want to get a 1600, I want to get a 1500. And like, yes, if you're applying to Yale, you probably should try to get a 1500 or higher. But depending on where you're going, a 1250 could be more than enough, not only to get in, but to get a scholarship. So it's really, really important that you actually look at the schools you're planning to apply to and see what they consider a good score, because you don't want to break your back shooting into the stratosphere if, you could have gotten 200 points less and still gotten the same scholarship and same acceptance letter. So you got to be careful and strategic in your prep and not waste a bunch of time and energy getting a score you don't really need. In fact, speaking of scores you don't need, a lot of students will be like, oh, I'm still shooting for a 1600. Okay, yes, but if you look here at the top row, if you can get a 1540, that's a 750 and a 790 combined, you're in the 99th percentile. You're in the top 1% already. That's a 1540. That's 60 points off from the maximum. You're still already in the top 1%. So again, don't kill yourself getting some, 1550, 1580, 1590. If a 1540 will get you a scholarship and into the school of your choice. In my case, I did some research, and my school that I was going to gave a scholarship for a 1500. So when I took the test for the first time and got a 1490, I was 10 points off. And I took it again because I actually really needed those last 10 points to get a scholarship. Like, it made a difference. I eventually ended up getting a 1540, and I got into the school and I got the scholarship. But it made absolutely no difference that I got a 1540 versus a 1550, 60, 70, 80, 90, or a perfect 1600. It made absolutely no difference. It would have been same scholarship, same acceptance letter. So it's good to look at the schools that you're trying to get into and see what they need for acceptance and for scholarships and try to hit that. And don't, destroy your life taking the test 10 times over, getting, some 30, 40, 50 extra points that don't actually matter. So make sure that your prep matters. And it's good to look at this table and just realize how low you can go and still have a very competitive score. Like, I can't stress this enough. Look at this right here. Just barely a 600 on both sections, and you're already in the top 30% of everyone. That's pretty incredible. Like that'll get you into some schools. So you don't need to necessarily berate yourself if you can't go too far into the thousands. It's a very tightly clustered scoring scale, and little gains make a very big difference. Now, there's a few folks asking questions, and I'm not going to answer all the questions now because I do want to have like an open Q&A period at the end where I'll answer some general questions. But a few folks are asking about guessing. On the SAT, there's no penalty for wrong answers, so guess away. And people are also asking about Kaplan's SAT tests. Those are not official because the College Board does not give that stuff away, but we have designed our tests to be as close as possible to the real thing as that can possibly be done. The College Board is nice. They've made 8 official practice tests available on their website for free, which I recommend doing. You can grab those anytime. And so we've used their official practice tests to make sure that ours are similar in test-like. Now, a few folks like Arushi are wondering about retaking the SAT. Yes, that is called super scoring. So the idea is that most colleges, not all, so check your school to make sure, but most schools will do what's called super scoring. And what that means is that if you take the test twice, and your math score goes up, but your reading score goes down, they'll take the better math score from the second test and combine it with the better reading score from the first test to decide what your score is. So it is usually to your advantage to take the test twice, because if either one of your sections improves, that improves your overall score. That being said, taking it 3, 4, 5 times, that starts to get a bit weird because it's like, why are you taking the test that many times and your score's not going up? Right? You should prep and make sure that you're getting a good score in practice test before you take the test again. So twice, good. More than twice starts to look a little bit fishy on the applications. Okay, so like I said, the bulk of today's session is going to be on like actual strategies and content for the SAT. So let's go in order that the things appear on the test. We're going to start with reading. The Kaplan method for SAT reading is really simple, but it's something almost nobody does. It's like amazing to me, like how nobody does this on the test unless, you know, we or someone else teaches them. So the idea is that when you take a passage or when you have the passage in front of you on test day, it is not important to learn everything that is in the passage. Most people, when they read, try to learn everything that's there, but that's not strategic and it's not wise. Let me know in the chat, why don't you need to try to learn everything in the passage when you read it on test day? I think maybe what happens is that people are used to doing this sort of reading for school. In school, when you read a chapter of your history textbook or something, you know, anything from that chapter could be on your final exam. So it's to your advantage to memorize as much of it as you can. But that final exam is in like weeks or months. On the SAT, the questions for the passage are coming up right now. And the passage isn't going anywhere. You can reference it as you answer the questions. So what would be the point of memorizing all these details? You are spending a bunch of time and energy memorizing details that A, might not even get asked about, so that was a waste of time. And then B, even if the details do get asked about, then you can look them up. So why spend that time and that energy? And I see a lot of folks mentioning timing. You are Cybri 5 absolutely nailing it. Like, yes, it just takes up too much time to learn everything in the passage. You get bored, you zone out. Let me know in the chat if that's ever you, or like it just feels like it takes forever to read the passage. A lot of students get discouraged. They think that they're like slow readers, and that's not really what's happening. You're not slow at all. There's nothing slow about you. It's just that you're spending so much energy trying to learn boring facts, you can't help but zone out. And then when you zone out, you have to reread. And when you reread, well, you just read it twice. So of course, it's going to take a lot of time. If you can just get everything the first time and read the passage once, you'll be in much better shape. And the way to do that is to do what we call reading actively. So that means that you are not trying to learn all the details. That's not what you're trying to do. What you do want to do instead is just get the big picture. Now, big picture means, why did the author write the passage? And what is the point of each paragraph? Like, what does this paragraph do in the passage? Does it give a supporting idea for a thesis? Does it give a bunch of facts about thing X, Y, or Z? Like, that kind of thinking is what's important for actually getting a good SAT score. So the idea is that when you take these notes, we're not like saying that you should summarize all the details. The notes are really more of like an outline. You're outlining the passage, almost like a table of contents for the passage, so that when you come back later, you know where to go to find a detail that you want. Now I'll show you how this works with some practice text. We're not going to see an entire passage, but we will see part of a passage and some questions, which will be enough to show you the idea of this method. Now, you might not be a master of it by the end of today, but you'll at least know what you should be practicing to get better at SAT reading. So let's take a look at this one. This passage looks into the effects and interactions between light and color and the resulting types of luminescence. Now, hang on. This is a really good blurb. Not all blurbs are this good, but this one's awesome because it tells you a lot about what the passage is about. Let me know in the chat, what's one concept that we're going to see in this passage that we can pretty much expect from this blurb? So it looks like light is important, color is important, and then it says the resulting. Now, resulting makes me think that's like the thing the author really wants to focus on, because that's like the conclusion. Resulting types of luminescence. So I'm thinking, okay, this is probably a passage about types of luminescence. No need, by the way, to write out that whole word on test day. Just, making some abbreviation that will make sense for the next 5 minutes works. Well, look at this paragraph. This is hard science. Atoms can be excited in many ways other than by absorbing a photon. The element phosphorus spontaneously combines with oxygen when exposed to air. There's a transfer of energy to the phosphorus electrons during this chemical reaction. You could spend a lot of time zoning out and reading and rereading all the science, but details don't matter. What matters is, what's the point of this paragraph? Which excites them to sufficiently high energy states so that they can subsequently emit light when dropping into a lower state. This is an example of what is termed chemiluminescence. The emission of light as a result of chemical reaction. Okay, so if our topic for the passage is types of luminescence, let me know in the chat, folks, which type of luminescence did the first paragraph provide? There's a good question here, by the way, from guest 396, who says, what's the best way to put this sentence? That's from the writing and language portion, which we'll see later. They never make sense to me because I think differently than test makers. So what I think is better isn't, and yes, for the situation, I checked both answers are grammatically correct, but people say it should be the flow. So guest 396, I'm going to tell you something that you might not like hearing, but this is the truth. And if you accept it, you're going to get an amazing SAT score. You are wrong. If you think differently than test makers, what you're doing is you're arguing with the test. And that's what the SAT wants. The SAT wants you to argue with the test, because if you're arguing with the test, then you're not doing what you got to do to get the question right. Embrace this fact. One of the choices is objectively right. The other three are objectively wrong. So in practice, always seek out the one specific reason why each wrong answer is objectively in a vacuum incorrect, and why the correct answer is objectively in a vacuum correct. If you think about it in those terms, there's one right, the rest are wrong. Why is the right one right? Why are the wrong ones wrong? And let your competition waste their time arguing with the test pointlessly. You're going to get a higher score on testing. Very good, everybody. This paragraph is about chemiluminescence. So all you really have to do on test day is make a quick note in your outline, chemiluminescence. No need to write the whole word out. That's fine. You don't have to do that. And now if a question asks about chemiluminescence, you'll know to look up all the stuff about phosphorus combining with oxygen. But if no question ever asks about chemiluminescence, you never have to care about any of this, and you can just completely purge it from your head. Next paragraph. A related effect is bioluminescence. Okay, hold on. So let me know in the chat, folks, what's going to be the purpose of this paragraph? This one comes out swinging. That's my favorite type of paragraph, where it says right in the opening sentence what the topic is. This one is about bioluminescence. So I'm going to immediately make that note. Now, you might ask at this point, well, can I just skip the paragraph? Let's get really strategic and not even read it. Well, no, you should read it. Read everything. Don't skim. Don't skip. The reason it's good to read it is that maybe the author just did a bad job organizing the paragraph, and there's another type of luminescence buried later on. Well, you don't want to miss that. So if there's something else that's like a big picture difference that really should have been 2 paragraphs, you want to catch it. So read it. But like, as you read it, don't worry about memorizing everything. Just read it sort of casually. All you're really doing is checking to see if there's anything else in there. Cybri, 5 folks, a lot of you found bioluminescence. Now let's look through it and see if there's anything else in here besides bioluminescence. Bioluminescence, when light is produced by chemical reactions associated with biological activity, bioluminescence occurs in a variety of life forms and more common in marine organisms. Examples include bacteria, jellyfish, clams, fungi, worms, and don't try to memorize all these animals. No one cares. There is considerable diversity in how it's produced. Most processes involve the reaction of protein with oxygen catalyzed by an enzyme. The protein varies from one organism, but they all are grouped under the luciferin. The enzymes are known for luciferase. Both words stem from Latin for lucifer, meaning light. The various chemicals down to bio. Okay, so bioluminescence here at the end of the paragraph is a good clue. The whole thing was about bioluminescence. Are yet to be explained in detail, but in some higher organisms, the process is known behind. Okay, cool. The whole paragraph was bioluminescence. Awesome. Don't need more notes. I'm moving on to paragraph 3. Now, this paragraph also has a great opening. Read it for yourself. Let me know in the chat, what's this paragraph going to be about? Now, I'm going to be honest. I was surprised by this paragraph. I was expecting another type of luminescence. I was thinking like, okay, paragraph 1, chemiluminescence. Paragraph 2, bioluminescence. Paragraph 3, next type of luminescence. I don't know. But no, this was still about bioluminescence. It was about the firefly. Now, again, read it all. Don't skip it. Don't skim it. But you're reading not with the objective of learning everything about the firefly. You're reading with the objective of making sure that it really is all about the firefly. In a way, active reading is reading with a different objective than usual. We are used to just having one objective when we read, and that is learn all the stuff. Pound it all into your brain. On the SAT, your objective is to get the purpose of the paragraph and then make sure it has no other purposes that are worth putting in your outline. That different objective should guide the way you read. Now, let's look at it. Its light organ is located near the end of the abdomen. Don't care. Within it, luciferins combine with other atomic groups in a series of processes in which oxygen. Don't care. The sequence culminates when the luciferin is split off from the rest, leaving an excited. Don't care. The X energy releases a photon. Peak in the emission spectrum lies between blah, 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 blah. Depending on the type of luciferase, the flash produced by the simultaneous emission of many photons serves to attract mates. Yes, it was all about the firefly. Cool story, bro. And I'm moving on to the next paragraph. And that's all we're going to have in this example, but there was, more passage text for this, and you would do the same thing for every paragraph. Just get the purpose of the paragraph down in your notes, right in the margins next to the paragraph, and then go on to the next one. When you read in this active way, you save a lot of time compared to someone who might even be a better reader than you, but is behind you because they're zoning out, getting lost, rereading and rereading and rereading, trying to read the way they do for school instead of the strategic way you should read for a standardized test. Now, doing a good job on the passage helps you when you get to the questions. That being said, it is important to practice the questions. And I know that guest was asking earlier about writing and language questions, but what's true for that is true for reading as well. There is no, it depends on how you look at it. There is no, well, I am just a creative thinker and I think differently from the test makers. No. One choice is objectively right. One choice is objectively wrong times 3. 3 right, 1 wrong, end of story. Never fall for the trap of arguing with the test makers on test day. If you think that 2 choices are both good, nope, say to yourself, I am wrong. One of these is correct, the other one is wrong. Let me try to figure out why the wrong one's wrong. Now, the best way to avoid that from happening, the best way to avoid yourself from thinking that 2 choices are both good in the first place is to predict an answer. Go to the passage, research, figure out the answer for yourself before you look at the answer choices. That is going to speed you up when you get to the choices. So let me show you how to do that. According to the passage, bioluminescence is more often found. Okay, well, I got a quote and a line reference. So I'm going to go back to line 11, and I'm going to look up for myself where bioluminescence is most often found. Now, it's in the animations here, but I'm going to do this kind of honestly as well. I'm actually going to take us back to the passage, just like you would have to do on test day. We're going to go back to our bioluminescence paragraph. And we're going to try to find where bioluminescence is most often found. So it starts in line 11. Take a look. and let me know in the chat as you read when you find it. Where is bioluminescence most often found? So the sentence in line 11 doesn't really tell you where it's most often found. It tells you what it is. The next sentence says it occurs in a variety of life forms. Okay, that's fine. And is more common in marine organisms than terrestrial or freshwater life. Bam, that's my ticket. I want the choice that says marine organisms. So I'll show you now with this snippet of the passage right there, marine organisms. So we know the answer already going into it. So when you look at the answer choices, there it is. Choice C, marine life. Oh, they said life instead of organisms. Okay, cool. So we're going to grab C for champions and move on with the SAT. You don't want to fall for the trap of being like, oh, well, let's see, fireflies. There's a whole paragraph about fireflies. How many fireflies are there? Maybe it's most often found. Nope. You find the answer in the passage, you pick it, you move on. Now, sometimes the SAT will ask more challenging questions, because this was a pretty low difficulty one. I'll take a look at a more challenging one with you next, that require you to make an inference. So this one says it can be inferred, and that's your clue that this is a harder question, that the emission spectrum described in lines blah, blah is what? Well, you should still try to figure out the answer, only now it's more open-ended. So what is true about the emission spectrum? Let me know in the chat. Do some reading. Hit me with it. What is one thing that's true about the emission spectrum mentioned in these lines? Well, I don't know necessarily what the SAT is going to want from me on this, but I do see a couple of facts that might be interesting about the emission spectrum. So one is that it produces a flash. Two is that it's a simultaneous emission, meaning happening at the same time. Three, it looks like it's attracting mates. And four, it also attracts a snack. The females use it to attract males of other species whom they eat. So I don't know which of those things the SAT is going to go for, but the correct answer should relate to one of these things or a combination of two somehow. So let's take a look at our answer choices. A, contains mostly ultraviolet light. Okay, can we prove choice A from the information that we identified in the passage about the emission spectrum? Oh, by the way, I saw a lot of you like guessed 113 and Robert mentioned this, mentioned that it depends on type of luciferase. Yes, very good. So that is something else that we could potentially predict as possibly appearing in the answer choices. We don't know that it's mostly ultraviolet light, because mostly means more than half, and there were no keywords in here about like what there was more than half of. So we're going to cross off choice A. B, requires special equipment to detect. Well, I didn't see anything about special equipment there, so definitely not choice B. Get out of here. C, you tell me in the chat, what's a word in choice C that I'm not saying makes a choice wrong, it might be the right answer, but what's a word in choice C that you should really carefully think about before you pick that answer choice? Very good. This is a word that you should imagine leaping off the page and just like smacking you in the face. Only. Don't let that word slip on by, because only means that nobody else does it except for fireflies. So there'd have to be some proof in the passage that only fireflies do this. And that was not there. The passage said that fireflies have it, but that doesn't mean that no one else does. Let me ask you kind of a weird question here. What should you do next? Like, tell me please in the chat, what is the next physical action that you're going to perform on test day at this moment in your life? Oh, Cyber 5, folks. Nice job. See, I'm looking back and see a lot of you found that word only. Very good. Extreme words require extreme proof. They could be right if there's extreme proof, but they do require extreme proof or else they're wrong. And at this point on test day, just pick choice D. Don't even think about it. Don't read it. Don't research it. Don't go, because your goal is to get a good score. The only thing that matters is, did you circle the right bubble? Did you circle bubble D for question number 2? As long as you circle bubble D, it makes no difference when you did it, as long as it is bubbled in at the end. So once you know what bubble you need to circle, you should circle it and move on, or bubble it in and move on. Don't waste time doing random thinking. You're not taking the SAT because you want to think, or because you just love the scintillating passages the College Board spews out. You are there to get a high score on the SAT. Once you know what you do to get to the correct answer, you pick it and move on. Now, if it's a practice test, okay, if it's a practice test, go back and review it and then be like, all right, I just picked D, but why is D correct? Visible to a variety of species. Well, that must be true. It's visible to fireflies because it attracts mates, and how would it attract them if they couldn't see it? And then it also is a lure for other species, plural. Well, again, how could other species be lured by it if they were not able to see it, if it wasn't visible to them? It would have to be visible. That's a deduction, kind of a small deduction, but it is a deduction that you have to make. That's what makes this a somewhat more challenging question, an inference question here. All right, folks, great work on reading. Let's move on to writing and language. Here's our 3-step method for attacking every single writing and language question you'll ever see ever. So whether you buy a Kaplan class later or this is the last time you ever work with us, I beg you to practice this method on every single writing and language question that you do from this point on. So first is read the passage. That is subtle, but a lot of people don't do this. In fact, it's okay. Let me know in the chat if that is something that you have tried in the past. If you, on the writing and language portion of the test, just like jump like a frog from question to question to question. I saw a really good question from Guest 113. Strategy questions are my favorite. So when I said you should just pick D and move on, Guest 113 said, what if you made a mistake on the last 3 choices? Shouldn't you try to find proof for your answer? So I'll answer them one at a time. What if you made a mistake? You're going to get the question wrong. Shouldn't you try to find proof? No, because it's better to be confident and wrong than to be doubtful and wrong anyway. What's going to happen a lot of the time, and I know people do this all the time, let me know in the chat if this is like the bane of your existence. You'll read choice A, and be like, oh yeah, that looks good, but I better keep reading all the other answers because I'm not a confident test taker. Then you read choice C, and you're like, oh, that looks good too. And then you talk yourself into picking C, and it was A all along. Well, that's going to happen if you're always second guessing yourself. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to get some questions wrong no matter what. So that's an equal factor in both options. Therefore, you shouldn't even consider it. What is different then between being confident and being second guessing is that if you're confident, you're faster and feel better during the test. So yes, if something was wrong about us crossing off A, B, or C, we will get the question wrong. But overall, it's still a better strategy because that time maybe we could have caught a mistake, but 10 other times we would have wasted a bunch of time checking stuff that made no difference. Now, a lot of you I see in the chat do in fact like to jump through. And that's amazing because now you know a mistake that your competition is going to make on test day that's going to make you do better than them. The reason why it's important not to jump from question to question is that there will be questions on every passage that require some understanding of the actual content of the passage. And when you do those questions, it's going to be difficult or sometimes even impossible if you've just been leapfrogging. So it's like in reading, you don't need to take notes, though. You don't need to outline, but just read it kind of casually. Try to keep your eye on the big picture as you read, and that's pretty much it. Now, when you get to an underlined portion, identify the issue, like punctuation, grammar, modifier agreement. Is it a bigger issue? Like, is it one of those questions? It's like, should this be added to the passage? Should it be deleted? Should it be revised? You know, those types of questions. Figure out what the SAT is testing. Now, in step 2, you eliminate choices that don't address the issue. We're suggesting an elimination strategy for writing and language, because basically if a choice doesn't even do anything at all about the issue being tested or does it wrong, you can cross it off. And sometimes it's all you have to do. But in the event that there is more than one choice remaining after you cross off all the ones that don't address the issue or address the issue incorrectly, then you check the choices that are left and find one that is 3 things: correct, concise, and relevant. So correct means it does not break any other grammar rules. Concise means it's not unnecessarily wordy. And relevant means that it's on topic and consistent with the passage. Like if the passage is saying that pandas are great, you wouldn't want to pick a choice that says pandas are stupid, even if that choice was concise and grammatically correct, because it would not be consistent with the rest of the passage. So correct, concise, relevant, that's your last chance check to find the right answer. Every wrong answer will fail at being one of these three things. Every correct answer will always be all three of these things. Now, as we practice questions today, we'll see some grammar topics. So let's go ahead and do a little bit of grammar review. This is an easy way to pick up points on writing and language. So commas. Let me know in the chat, right now in your life, do you mainly just put commas wherever you feel like you need to pause? Is anyone still kind of like in the pause method of comma usage? Hey, great comment from guest 396. Cybri5, guest 396. Love that light bulb moment. Yes, that could be maybe the cause of some of your issues, that, you know, it's wordy and another choice says the same thing, but with fewer words, therefore the wordy choice is wrong. That may be what's happening. I'm glad that you figured that out. That's amazing. I was an English major in college, and most of my life I wrote commas like what I felt like they needed a pause. And I see in the chat, a lot of you are in my club or my previous club. And the thing is, like, I really wish someone had shown me this slide basically at any point in high school or college, because it would have saved me a lot of grief. Sometimes it's very annoying because you can't quite tell, like, should I have a pause or not here? On the SAT, let your competition use the pause technique for deciding commas. The way you got to think about it is commas do four things. Four things. So make a mental checklist, make some flashcards, maybe even screenshot this page. Definitely make some flashcards, memorize the four things that commas do. It is going to take some effort, but it will help you be confident on the SAT that you're doing the right thing. And it'll help you in real life too. Like right now, in addition to teaching for Kaplan, I also do content development. And like when I'm, writing a paragraph or an explanation, I do this, like what you're seeing on the slide. I actually do this in my job, and it's such a big help. I wish I had had this in my brain, like while I wrote all those college papers, because it would have saved me a lot of agonizing about comma usage. So here are the four things the commas do. Number one, you can use a comma with a fanboys conjunction to connect to complete sentences. Fancy grammar lingo is independent clauses, but I'm just going to call them complete sentences. Basically, if you have two complete sentences, you can connect them with a comma and a fanboys word. And if you're like, what's a fanboys word, Boris? This right here. These 7 words in English are the conjunctions that with a comma can be used to connect two complete sentences. Here's how that might look like. Notice this. Jess finished her homework earlier than expected. That can stand by itself as a complete sentence. She started a project that was due the following week. That is a complete sentence, not a realistic one, but that is grammatically correct as a complete sentence. So what's connecting them? A comma and the word so, which is one of our fanboys conjunctions. So there you have it. That's one of the things that you can do with a comma. So you can check when you see a comma on the SAT. Hey, is this comma being used with the fanboys word to connect two complete sentences? If so, that's a good comma. Okay, next up, separate a modifying phrase from the rest of the sentence or an intro phrase. That's an easy one. Like in this next sentence, knowing that soccer practice would be especially strenuous, comma. That's not a complete sentence, right? You can't put that by itself as a complete sentence, but that is a modifying phrase. It's modifying Tia. And by modifying, we just mean that it's describing her, who is right after the comma. So when you have a phrase that describes something or introduces something, you can attach it by a single comma to a complete sentence. Now, lists use commas as list separators as long as there are 3 or more items. This is very important. There have to be 3 or more items. Sometimes the SAT will try to trick you with a 2-item list and stick a comma in the middle. No matter how good it sounds, it is wrong. You only use a comma if there are 3 or more items in the list. And let me know in the chat, my grammar nerds, step forward out of the woodwork, please, and tell me, what do you call that comma right there? The one after the raincoat. That little guy is a what? That, my friends, is the Oxford comma. Now, you might have been told at some point not to use an Oxford comma. And that is a source of some debate among writers all over the world. I don't want to open up that can of worms here, but I will just acknowledge that, like, you can find professional style guides for journalists, for example, that will say, don't use the Oxford comma, which is Brian. I see a lot of you know about that. Very good. Some guests know about it. Xeloff knows about it. And Elise, excellent. Main thing you got to know for the SAT is the SAT does use the Oxford comma. That's pretty much it. So as long as you know that the SAT uses it, if you don't use it in your regular life, fine, not a problem. Just make sure that you sacrifice your soul and sell your principles for higher SAT points on test day, and always put the Oxford comma in there. And last but not least, we have separating non-essential information from the rest of the sentence. Now, this is some serious grammar lingo. Let me know in the chat if you know what this is called. This thing right here that says, who was the head of the English department? You don't need to know that terminology, but I do want to give my resident verbal vixens a chance to show off. What's that called? So notice, folks, that I don't actually need that stuff in the blue box. I don't need it. I can just read the sentence without it. Professor Mann was known for including a wide variety of reading materials in the curriculum. The sentence works just fine without this stuff in the blue box. And that indeed, very now, Brian 5 guest 5004, fantastic. That is a positive. Don't need to know that word. But the main thing is that you do need to know is the concept. Non-essential information can be inserted in the middle of a sentence between a pair of commas. So with some practice, I'm not saying this is easy, but with some practice, you can get to the point where you have memorized and can just rattle them off at a moment's notice, the 4 uses of commas on the SAT. Let me actually give us a little bit of white space and I'll type them out. I'll copy and paste them. And then we're going to bring them back out when we need to for the questions. 4 uses of commas. So 1, with fanboys, connect 2 complete sentences. I saw actually a few folks were asking, like, what is an independent clause? Independent clause is basically a complete sentence. It's just not standing by itself as a complete sentence, but it's something that could have been a complete sentence. Number 2, lists with 3 or more items. We also saw commas appear to attach an intro or a modifying phrase. And finally, insert non-essential information. So those 4 uses of commas, whenever you see a problem on the SAT, especially if a comma is underlined, ask yourself, does this comma do one of these 4 things? And if it does, great, keep the comma. If it does none of the 4 things, then you need to actually get rid of that comma. Okay, so with that said, let's get a move on our next bit of grammar review. Luckily, this will be pretty quick. Let me know in the chat, folks, if you know, what does a semicolon do? I'd move ahead to the next slide, but it'll give it away. So let me know in the chat before we jump there. What does a semicolon do? Semicolons sometimes are feared among high school students because in a lot of old-timey writing, they are used weirdly, and that can make you think it's a very strange bit of punctuation, like in the stuff that you had to read for English class. But the good news is that semicolons really just do mainly one thing. They connect 2 complete sentences, or to be fancy about it, 2 independent clauses. So as long as you know that, you're good to go. Like here, Gabby knew that her term paper would take at least 4 more hours to write. That's a complete sentence. She got started in study hall and then finished it at home. That's a complete sentence. What's connecting them? A semicolon. Great job. Fine. Now, there's also this other thing where if you have a list of things that has commas in it, then you use a semicolon as a list separator instead of a comma to avoid confusion. I've never seen that on any college board. problem. And there are 8 full-length College Board practice tests. Unless I forgot or missed one, I've never seen this. Now, I'm not saying it's not possible. It is a function of a semicolon. But mainly, guys, you need to know this one. You need to know that a semicolon on the SAT will be used to connect 2 complete sentences. I see some folks are still asking about what is an independent clause. That's just a thing that could be a complete sentence by itself. Like if you wrote it by itself with a period and a capitalized first letter, it wouldn't be a sentence fragment. So just check, check what came before the semicolon, check what came after the semicolon. And if they're both complete sentences, then that's a good semicolon. Otherwise, the semicolon's got to be fixed. And now I'm going to ask you about colons. Let me know in the chat, folks. What do colons do? Ooh, neat question from Kavang. What's the difference between a hyphen and a dash? So you want to think of a hyphen as not really being a punctuation mark. A hyphen is used in some like compound words, to attach them together. A dash is an actual punctuation mark. It can work kind of like a comma, semicolon, or a colon. It's a very weird punctuation mark. It can sort of be anything you want it to be. Whereas a hyphen is not a punctuation mark. It's just like a part of some words. Now, a lot of you are mentioning lists, which is exactly what I was hoping for. This is the #1 thing that people say. And I love, especially, actually, what Reagan said and what Iacosta said, introduce a list. Oh, that makes me so happy. Because you're right, a colon can introduce a list. Here's what you might not have known and what your competition is not going to know on test day. A colon can introduce whatever the heck it wants. Short phrase, quotation, explanation, example. Anything that you want to introduce, you can introduce with a colon. Lists too. But what's interesting is for some reason we tend to think of colons as being associated with lists. They are not exclusive to lists. Colons are associated with the act of introduction and or emphasis. So here, for example, we see that Sanjay had 2 important projects to complete, a science experiment and an expository essay. Now, that's not technically a list. It's only 2 things. It's not a list of 3 or more that would require a comma to connect the items. Or you can write something like this. I think most of us would agree this is not a problematic sentence. I'll never forget what I saw in the box. 5,000 clown suits or whatever. Now, that is a perfectly fine sentence, but clearly what's coming after that colon isn't a list. The main thing you have to know for the SAT, apart from introduction, is that the stuff before the colon needs to be a complete sentence. Look at this. Sanjay had 2 important projects to complete. Complete sentence. I'll never forget what I saw in the box. That's a complete sentence. But if I wrote it like this, if I wrote, I opened the box and saw colon 5,000 clown suits, that, my friends, would be incredibly wrong. Very, very wrong. Don't want to do that. Because now what comes before the colon, I opened the box and saw, is not a complete sentence. And so it's wrong. The way to fix it there is to just get rid of the colon. You would just say, open the box and saw 5,000 clown suits. No problem with that now. So when you see a colon on the SAT, just check 2 quick things. #1, is it introducing and or emphasizing something? And #2, is the part that came before it a complete sentence? If you just memorize that, then you're going to get these points on test day and not even sweat it. Okay, I'm going to pause here, give you a second to screenshot if you would like to. And we'll move on to some practice questions. Now, guest 8221 is asking, why wouldn't you put a comma? Now, I'm not sure which thing you were looking at for that, but if it was a semicolon, you wouldn't do it because a comma cannot connect 2 complete sentences the way a semicolon does. That's called a comma splice. It's a mistake. As for a colon, well, in the first case that we see on this screen, you could. That would actually be legal on the SAT because we have something that's not a complete sentence attached to something that is, which is fine. In the second case, with the 5,000 clown suits, you could not, because that would just be an unnecessary comma. It wouldn't be doing any of the 4 comma functions. All right, folks, let's do some practice questions. Remember the 3-step Kaplan method. Read, identify the issue, eliminate choices that don't address the issue. And then if you have to, check to see correct, concise, and relevant for the choices that are left. Let's start, which right off the bat, there's a question. Although most of the products we buy today are made abroad in well-known places like Mexico and China, a quick check of many clothing labels will reveal the name of a country that might not be so familiar. Okay, so we have a comma here, clearly. Let's go ahead and whip out our 4 uses of commas. Let me know in the chat which of these 4 uses of commas is applicable in the situation that we see at the beginning of this paragraph. And if you think that none of them are applicable, then just say none. Ooh, great question from Yuri. Can we have an independent clause after a colon? Yes. You can have either an independent or not. Either one works. Here, none of the uses of commas apply. Not a single one. There is no fanboys word, so it can't be number 1. We're obviously not in the middle of a list, so it's not number 2. Although it's a single word, it's not an intro or modifying phrase, and we need another comma to have there be non-essential information, and there isn't one. So it's none of them. So we don't want to have a comma here at all. That means in step 2, we get rid of choice A. Sadly, A is the only choice with a comma, but C is a punctuation mark that we also clearly do not need because a semicolon connects 2 complete sentences, and although is a word, it's not a complete sentence, so that needs to go. Now, between B and D, let me know in the chat, how are we ever going to decide? Well, to do that, you have to read the entire sentence, don't you? Because it might seem like D is better than B because it's a word shorter. But the problem is that if you do D, you actually create a comma splice in this sentence. I'll do a little bit of highlighting. Everything leading up to the comma before China would be a complete sentence if you took out the word although. And everything after that comma would also be a complete sentence. So you'd now have a comma connecting 2 complete sentences, which a comma cannot do. So you actually do need the word although on this one in order for the first part before the comma to actually be like an introductory phrase. In that case, it would be use number 3 of commas. And then there would be a comma followed by an independent clause, which is totally fine. So we're going to grab choice B for Boris here after step 3 of the Kaplan method. Very, very carefully rules out choice D because it is grammatically incorrect. All right, folks. So again, to recap, D is a grammatical error. If you read the entire sentence with D, you get a comma splice. With B, you don't. So it's time to finally pick choice B for Boris and Skadoodle. Okay, let's take a look at number the next. So here it says, a quick check of many labels will reveal a country that might not be so familiar, period. It's Mauritius. Well, as you look at the answer choices, you realize the question is, can we somehow combine these to avoid using the word it's? Let me know in the chat what you think. Do we need to have this word here? We do not, because the SAT does not like you to have subject repetition. And we don't need to say it's if we're saying the country name right after it. And we said there was a country right before it. So in step 2 of the Kaplan method, let's go ahead and get rid of choices A and B. We do not need that subject. It is unnecessary. Now between C and D, C is shorter. So we check, is that an accurate use of a colon? And the answer is yes, because we're introducing the name of the country and what comes before it is a complete sentence. So C for champions, it is. Shortest choice, and it's correct. Grab that choice, confirm it, and move on with the SAT. Now's a good time to remind you, as a lot of you already know, we do have 2 amazing teachers behind the scenes, Laura and Jason, so please do not stop asking them your questions. They are SAT experts, and today, your private tutors. All right, now as I pop the next one up on the screen, Take a moment to read it and let me know in the chat, what sort of issue is the SAT testing on this question? There's a list here. We have a whole bunch of things all in a list. Now, we did say that commas are used for lists. We didn't actually go into the rules of how to make a list, but that's something you may already know. You got to have a comma after every item except the last item, and you need to have the word "and" before the last item. And that's all you have to do on this one. As you go to step 2 of the Kaplan method, eliminate any answer choice that does not correctly put together a list. Choice A has a random and a semicolon in the middle. What is A doing? I don't know. So that choice needs to go. Choice B has a random and in the middle of it as well. You only have an and before the last item, so that needs to go. Choice C is going very avant-garde. It gets rid of the and entirely. That's no good. So only one choice really shows up to the ball game here and tries to play, and that's choice D. Comma after each item, an and before the last item, and don't forget that comma before the and, the Oxford comma, the SAT says yes to that. So you have to remember to use it. That's D for domination. Grab that choice, confirm it, and move on with the SAT. Robert Reagan, cyber high five. Nice job catching the issue. That's step 1 where you identify the issue is so important, because if you know it's being tested, it's easy to cross some choices off. Okay, we have one final question. So the last one had a list of people. Roughly 80 years of Dutch control brought waves of blah, 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 and blah, whose collective arrival brought international recognition to Mauritius. Okay, so whose? Let me know in the chat, folks. What's the meaning of who apostrophe S? It's who is, or sometimes who has. If you're ever not sure whether to use the form with the apostrophe or without the apostrophe, easy way to do it is just plug in the contraction and see if it works. Roughly 80 years of Dutch control brought waves of blah, 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 and blah. Who is collective arrival brought international? No, that doesn't make any sense. So we definitely do not want the whose. What we want is the whose with no apostrophe. That means belonging to whom. Now, step 2 of the Kaplan method is an absolute piece of cake, because choice A has the apostrophe, which we know is wrong. And then choice C and D do random stuff. We know that we just need the correct whose, and only choice B delivers. So step 2 of the Kaplan method brings the bacon all the way home. Let's pick B for Boris and move on with the SAT. Lots of participation. Cyber high five, folks. Great to see you all in the chat. That's amazing. Very nice job. We can pick that choice and skedaddle. Now, in the final part of our class today, let's take a moment and do some math. It may be tempting to think of math as just like, okay, do math, and I'll work on some math. But on the SAT, it's a strategic test throughout, and the math is no exception, which is why we have a method for math as well, so that you can follow the same set of steps every time and avoid wasting time being lost or zoned out or wondering what to do. The method will help you figure it out. So the first thing you should do is actually not worry about solving the problem. Instead, figure out the information. Just take stock of the information in the question. Sometimes what I used to do is, even though I was good at math, I'd read a question and just feel tired. And the SAT does that a lot, because a lot of the problems, as you know, if you've done a practice test, are very wordy. So it's like, oh my God, I don't want to be doing this. And then you just kind of like get fatigued. Don't do that. Just take a deep breath. Step 1 of the Kaplan method. What's the information? What have I been given by the grace of the College Board? And then I go to step 2. Once I have the information, I'm going to be like, all right, well, what's the best way to approach this problem? And there are 4 basic strategies. One is, okay, yes, sometimes you got to do the math. Okay, that's a strategy. Sometimes you can pick numbers. That means you basically make up values for whatever variables are in the question, if the question has variables. and you solve the problem using the numbers that you made up instead of using algebra. And that might be an easier way to go about answering the question. Sometimes you can cross off the wrong answers. This is really nice if the choices are complicated. The more complicated the choices are, the more likely it is you can eliminate them without actually doing all the work in the problem. And then, yeah, if you get here and you're like, all right, Boris, I did what you said. I didn't start trying to solve the problem and do random math. I collected the information, I organized it, and I was lost. All right, then, take a guess and move on. It's better to guess and move on than to waste 5 minutes and still get the question wrong anyway because you don't know what to do. Be willing to skip questions on the SAT because they're all worth the same. And you might as well go through the whole section, pick up all the points that you can get, and then come back and try to grizzle out the ones that are confusing, than wasting a bunch of time on a question that makes no sense, and possibly then not having enough time to answer a question that you could have totally answered if only you had seen it. Now in step 3, just make sure you're not falling for a trap, guys. You know how it is. Sometimes the SAT is like, hey guys, hey, here's an equation to solve for X. Oh, look, X equals 5. Look, choice A says 5. You want to pick choice A, guys? You want to pick choice A? A's a good, X is 5, A says 5. But in reality, the question was like, hey, what's Z? And then you get it wrong. And that is maddening. But the good news is it ain't going to happen on test day as long as you follow the Kaplan method. So always, always, always take that 0.02 seconds to make sure that what you're bubbling in is what the College Board actually asked for. Do that, and you're never going to fall for that trap ever again in your life. Okay, so read, choose a strategy, make sure you're not falling for a trap. Those are the 3 steps of the Kaplan method. Let's practice them on a sampling of math problems covering a variety of topics. And if you don't know some of the math, that's fine. It's not the end of the world. You can practice and learn math. The SAT does not test math that you didn't cover by like the end of Algebra 2. And a lot of it is earlier than that. So it's not a super big deal on the math front, but strategy-wise is where people get tripped up. Okay, so here's a scary-looking question with a graph and a whole bunch of words. Take a deep breath. Step 1 of the Kaplan method. In the figure shown, what is the value of blah, blah, blah? We have answer choices that are a mix of whole numbers and fractions, but they're all negative. And then in the graph, we have these 3 functions, h, g, and f. So when I get to step 2, I'm thinking probably the best way here is just to do the actual math, because I can probably figure out the values of all these things and then just do a bit of arithmetic. So let's start with h of 0. Function h in the picture is the curvy function. That's function h. Let me know in the chat, folks, what is h of 0? Now, if you're like, what, h parentheses 0? What the heck is that? Function notation, I don't know this sorcery. Yes, that is some math that you'll have to review. It's possibly something you didn't cover till Algebra 2, but it's not a big deal. You can review that math before your SAT and get there by test day. Very nice here, folks. H of 0 is 4, because you can see that when the x value is 0, you go up the y-axis till you hit that curving function, and you're going to hit it at 4. So the question is asking, what is 4 minus 3 times other stuff? Okay, g of 2. G is the really steep function, and again, like with h, you can see where it is, what its value is at 2. So at 2, let me actually show you this. It's a bit, it'll always show you this on the SAT, even if it doesn't seem clear now. It'll always like show you the point. So it'll show you like g of 2 is right there, and you'll be able to see it. And that's 8. So the question is 4 minus 3 times parentheses 8 minus something. And let me know in the chat, folks, function f, the last one there. What is f of 2? Very nice, very, very nice. F is this straight line. When x is 2, you go up to that red line. Oh, it's 3. 3 spaces up is how far you got to travel to hit that line. So f of 2 is 3. So there's our arithmetic. 4 minus 3 times 8 minus 3. 8 minus 3 is 5. 3 times 5 is 15. So the answer is 4 minus 15, also known as negative 11. Make sure you're done. Step 3 of the Kaplan method. Are you done? Yes. We solved that arithmetic expression, which is what the question wanted. So good, good, good. Another one for B for Boris. Pick that choice, confirm it, and move on with the SAT. So that's how you do a math problem strategically. Don't assume that just because there's a whole bunch of stuff in the booklet that it's some like scary impossible thing. Oftentimes the problems are much easier than the mass of words would make them look like. Now the next question that we have, I'm going to give you to do on your own. So if you'd be so kind, Laura, please give us a poll with 4 answer choices for question number 8. Folks, Laura, in addition to being our resident SAT expert, is also a fantastic poll master. She's getting that poll up and running. And I'm going to let you try this question on your own. I'm going to give you a minute and a half. Now, you're not going to see a timer on the screen, but I will have a timer running on my computer. When 90 seconds are up, we'll see how you did and review your answers. Don't worry about getting it right or wrong right now. Worry about getting it right or wrong after we review it, because the SAT doesn't care if you get something right or wrong on your first try. All that matters is that you click the right bubble on test day. Now I'll see you in 90 seconds. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and review this question. Looks like a lot of you found the right answer on this one. Very, very nicely done. Let's go ahead and get right to cracking. So first things first, we need to identify the question. It's asking you which of the following represents Clara's vote count as a function of time, t, and days. Look at the answer choices. They're all functions in the form v of t equals something with t. You've got a table as well. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of words here, but just looking at the choices in the table, you realize, oh, I need to figure out which of these answer choices matches the table. So now I go to step 2 and say, okay, what's the best strategy to do that? One strategy is to look at the table and derive a function that maps 3 to 21, 4 to 35, 5 to 53, and so on. That would be the math way of doing this problem. And that's maybe what you would do in a high school math class. But you've got answer choices, so elimination is a much better approach here. Just cross off the choices that don't make any sense until only one choice is left. Well, let me know in the chat, folks. What is one choice or pair of choices you see here that makes absolutely no sense? Regardless of, what else you're going to do in the problem, what is an answer choice here that just absolutely cannot possibly be the correct answer? Joy's wondering, by the way, is this an example of an Algebra 2 question? Yes, this would be the kind of thing that you probably covered in Algebra 2 because it does involve functions, which personally, I did not see until I was in 10th grade taking Algebra 2. Well, we know that on day 3, there's a vote count of 21. So these plus 21s in choices C and D are awfully suspicious. C and D are going to be 21 when your day is 0, but we're supposed to get 21 when the day is 3. I don't even have to test those. I can just cross them off because they definitely have the wrong y-intercept. Now, A and B, you got a couple different options here. One is you can test. You can just plug in 3 into each choice and see which one works. And you'll see that A works and B doesn't, as about 90% of you found. Very, very nicely done. We can go ahead and grab that choice and move on. I can't do barbecue stars here, but this is about as close as we can get here. Maybe a little bit darker. So close. So close and yet so far from the barbecue greatness. Now, another strategic option that you had here is to realize that choice B is awfully suspicious. T squared divided by 2 is going to be an odd number, or is going to be a fraction whenever T is an odd number, because any odd number squared is odd, and an odd number divided by 2 is a decimal. You can't have a decimal number of votes. So C and D are wrong because they have the wrong intercept, and then B is wrong because it's going to be a decimal sometimes. The only choice that makes any sense whatsoever is choice A. And you can pick that choice confidently without having to test every single value in the table. You shouldn't even test any more than one because it has to be the right answer because the other ones have to be wrong. All that matters is that you circle the right bubble on test day. Don't sit there on either the math or the reading or the writing test and do random thinking and work beyond more than what you have to do to find the correct answer. All right, folks, congratulations on making it this far. We are at now our final question of the afternoon. For this one, I am again going to give you a timer that you can't see on the screen, but it'll be running on my computer for 1.5 minutes. Laura, if you'd be so kind, please give us one more poll to vote in. Folks, I'll see you in 90 seconds. Good luck and enjoy the practice. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and review this one. Very nice work as always. This is a good strategic question. So step 1 of the Kaplan method, you ask yourself, what is the SAT asking me? What is the available information? So here, what we know is that there is some function, blah, and we're also told that it is satisfied when x is -5 and when x is 7. We're asked for the value of 2k. Now that may look scary because there's a quadratic, but here's the trick on this problem. The test makers tell you what the solution is for x. They tell you x is -5 is a solution and x is 7 is a solution. So all you have to do when you get to step 2 is plug one of these values in. Let me know in the chat, what was your preference? Did you prefer to plug in -5 or did you prefer to plug in 7 for x? There are pros and cons to both. If you use -5, you get smaller magnitudes of values, but you might have to do some trickery with negatives. If you plug in 7, you get bigger magnitudes of values, but at least you don't have to worry about negative sign shenanigans. So I'll plug in 7, but it was totally fine if you wanted to plug in -5, as I see like Guest396 did, Reagan did. Fantastic. Nothing wrong whatsoever with plugging in 5. So the equation now is 1/4, or 0.25, times the quantity, 4 times 7 squared, minus 8 times 7, minus k, don't know what that is, and that equals 30. So a quick note, you could just multiply both sides of the equation by 4 to get rid of that weird decimal. So it's going to now be 4 times 49, which is 7 squared, minus 8 times 7, which is 56, minus k, and 30 times 4 is 120. Okay, so at this point, just got to do a little bit of arithmetic. This would definitely be a calculator question, so you can punch it in your calculator if you like. 4 times 49 is 196. So 196 minus 56 minus k equals 120. And then subtract 56 from 196. It's a very convenient number, 140. 140 minus k equals 120. So let me know in the chat, folks, what is k when all is said and done and you've solved this equation? 140 minus 20 is k. So k is 20. And now you do the last step of the Kaplan method and you say, is this the final answer? Whoops, it's not the final answer. The final answer is asking for 2k and we got k. Oh, SAT. Don't be mad. When the SAT does tricks like this, that is awesome because it's better that you fall for those tricks now than that you fall for those tricks on test day. And now if you did pick choice B along with roughly 1 in 10 of the folks who are at this event today, you have motivation to remember for the rest of all time, step 3 of the Kaplan method. Make sure you're done. Okay, so if k is 20, then of course 2k is 40. We're going to go ahead and grab choice A for awesome. That is the final answer, and move on with the SAT. Folks, great job. By the way, 100% of you picked A or B. So all of you did the math. That's amazing. That's the most important thing. But also, about 10% of your competition is going to be waylaid by choice B for bogus. And you're not, because you came today. Anyone could have come today, right? It's a free event. Why aren't there 10,000 people here? There could be, but there aren't. You came, other people didn't. You practiced this. You learned this method. Other people didn't. So on test day, you're going to get it right and others will get it wrong. And that's how you get a higher score on this test. Remember, your score on the SAT is a percentile. It's a measure of what percent of people got fewer questions right than you. So whenever there's tricky stuff like this, it's good because it helps your score relative to people who are still falling for traps. All right, folks, thank you so much for coming to our event today. I'm going to wrap things up with just a quick set of tips as well as some advice if you are thinking of being a Kaplan student. And of course, I'm also going to leave a little bit of time for questions, just an open question period, if there's anything you'd like to ask. So some basic tips as you continue on in your prep. As you saw today, it's really important to learn strategies for this test. Some people just study grammar and math and read books, and that may help, but not as much as actually learning strategies, because ultimately this is not a content test the way the SAT 2s are, for example, or the way the AP tests are. This is a strategy test. It happens to test a little bit of outside knowledge, but mostly it's strategy. So you have to figure out the most effective way to approach these problems, and sometimes learn tricks that you need, even if you do know all the content. To that end, all the practice that you do should be realistic test-like practice. That means like working with the 8 official practice tests or working with, high quality published SAT prep books. Like Kaplan has one, others do as well, but make sure that you're not just doing random math problems from Khan Academy or from a math textbook or something. It's not enough to just know math. You want to make sure that everything that you're studying is geared toward the SAT specifically. Take a lot of practice tests. The College Board gives you 8 for free. If you're a Kaplan student or get a Kaplan book, you get more. The more that you take them, the more that your confidence goes up, because if you take 6 full-length tests and then go take the real SAT, you'll feel much more confident doing it than if you had never taken a practice test before and it was just some strange experience. Now, I'm going to add to this one point that I think makes a very big difference. Review every question. Review every single question you do in your practice, every single one, because that's when you really learn the most. Doing it helps a little, reviewing it helps a lot. And if you got it wrong, I know that you might feel sad and it feels bad to look over it again. But honestly, getting a question wrong, looking over it and be like, oh, that was a dumb mistake, I can easily fix that next time, will raise your confidence. So don't miss out on those confidence and score raising opportunities. Review every single question that you practice from every test before you do the next test. And finally, reach out to sources of expertise if you need help. You don't have to do this all alone. In particular, if you are thinking of taking a class at some point, I know a lot of you are not sure yet when you're taking your SAT, which makes sense because we're not even sure yet when the SAT is going to be administered, am I right? Kaplan has a variety of ways to help. We have classes online, and in that setting, it's very similar to today in that you can ask questions. There's a teacher on camera, teacher off camera, and we go through the material. We do have in-person classes. They're the same as our online classes. They just happen in a physical classroom. If you're someone who's a real go-getter, you might not need either one of those. You can go for our self-paced option. With self-paced, the way it works is you basically get all the resources that the classroom students get minus the time with a teacher. So you can watch recordings of all the sessions and work with all the same practice materials. Everything a classroom student gets, you get too, which is like, hundreds and thousands of practice problems, but you just do it on your own instead of having a classroom teacher tell you what to do. On the other end of the extreme is private tutoring. That's of course more expensive, but if you know that you need a lot of support and you want to go through the class one-to-one with a Kaplan teacher, then that's the option you should consider. Now, the last thing that the marketers love to mention is the higher score guarantee or your money back. This is true. If you do the course and all your homework and take all the practice tests and your score doesn't go up, you will get your money back. I can verify that that really does happen. Kaplan really do it. However, this marketing thing about the money back is, I think, a little bit silly because no one is like excited to get their money back from a prep course because that means your score didn't go up. The really cool thing about the higher score guarantee is that if your score goes up, but not as much as you wanted it to, you can actually extend your access to the Kaplan resources for another full test cycle and keep prepping with, the quiz bank and with, our classroom videos and all the other online practice problems and tests that we have. So that's what's valuable to me as a teacher is that, if you start at 1,000 and you're trying to get a 1,400 and you go up to a 1,200, that's amazing. 200 points is a lot. You are now a lot more competitive. That represents a lot of work. But if you wanted to go up another 200 points, we don't just say, well, you did a good job, bye. We will actually let you come back and work with the program again for another full cycle so that you have our resources to work with as you re-prep for the SAT and take it again. That is the most valuable part. And that is something a lot of students do because, life gets in the way or whatever. And it's nice to know that you've got a bit of a safety net in that you can keep on prepping for free if your score does not go up as much as you wanted. Now we're at the time. So if you want to leave, you're allowed to leave. I will just say thank you so much for coming. It's an honor that you gave us your time this afternoon on a Saturday. We really appreciated seeing you. Thank you so much. And I wish you all the best of luck in your ongoing prep for testing. I hope maybe to see you sometime in a class or other event. That being said, if you're not heading out, which you're allowed to do, but if you're not heading out because you want to ask some questions, now's the time. Go ahead and pop them in there and we'll answer as many questions as we can. So Grace is asking, what's the difference on the subject tests and the SAT? Everything. There's like nothing in common. The subject tests are content tests. They just test how well you know chemistry or physics or writing or math or whatever. The SAT is a strategy test. The SAT is used by pretty much all colleges. The subject tests are only required for some. So your subject tests are basically like if you're applying to a school and it says specifically that they require a subject test, you take it to tick the box and that's it. And it's just about memorizing content. There's no strategy to it. But the SAT is strategic. Like in my case, I actually got a perfect 800 on the math SAT 2 subject test, but I could not ever quite get an 800 on the regular SAT math, even though regular SAT math is at a lower level than the math subject test, which is pre-calc. So how come that is? Well, that's because the pre-calc SAT subject test was just very straightforward content testing, whereas the math had tricky stuff in it, and I couldn't quite catch all the tricks. So that's the difference between those tests. Student asks, can we watch this again somehow? Yes, you can sign up for this event again, just like the way you did for this event this time. And you can attend our free events as many times as you like. Is there more algebra on the SAT or geometry? Good question. I'm actually not sure, Joy, about the breakdown between algebra 2 specifically or geometry. I will just say that algebra in general is more common than geometry. Yasmin asks, what kind of topics will be on the SAT essay? That's a very good question. So the SAT essay is called, it makes you do something that is called rhetorical analysis. You will be given a fairly long prompt, which is usually a speech of some kind or some work of persuasive writing, and you will have to analyze what the person did to try to make it persuasive. So there's nothing that you have to make up yourself. You're not making up a thesis. You're not defending it with examples. You are analyzing someone else's rhetorical strategies. Guest 313 is asking, is a 1200 a good score? Do I need to retake it? The answer is it depends, maybe. If you're applying to Yale, yep, you got to retake it. If you're applying to a local community college, nope, you're doing just fine. So it depends on where you're applying for school. Check to see your individual school's requirements. Ayakas is asking, what are the SAT study plans that you offer? So our prep course covers everything that you have to know for the SAT. So we switch between reading, math, and writing in our sessions. And along the way, we cover all of the topics that you need to have covered to be able to get a good score on testing. How do you register for the subject test? The College Board website, just like for the SAT. Do colleges prefer weighted or unweighted GPAs? It's a really good question. And the answer is it depends on the college. But for the most part, you can expect colleges to sort of unweight the GPAs themselves and calculate your GPA that way so that they can compare you on an equal playing field to other students. Should I take a subject test even if it's not required? Asks 4990. No. It really does nothing if it's not required whatsoever. Just like the SAT essay, if none of your schools require it, you gain nothing from taking it. Joy asked, is the SAT essay timed? Yes, it is 50 minutes long. There was a great question earlier. I saw someone had asked, what will the next boot camp cover? All of our events that have the same name cover the same material. So it'll be a little bit different because, you know, every teacher teaches differently, but it'll be the same questions, same slides if you attend the event that is titled exactly SAT Bootcamp. But if you go for a differently named event, it will cover different things. Ooh, I'm not sure, guest 313, how do you get an SAT application fee waiver? I'm not sure how to do that or what the requirements are, but my advice would be to contact schools and figure out the process from their admissions departments. Student asks a very interesting question. What is the youngest age you can take the SAT? Well, there is no limit, but your score is only good for 5 years. So for practical purposes, you are not going to want to take it any earlier than your freshman year of high school, because if you take it earlier than that, then your score might expire before you apply. I mean, technically you could take it the spring of 8th grade and be safe, but it's not practical usually to take it any earlier than high school. Will the SAT Bootcamp have different content, as Reagan? Yes, of course, because the ACT is a different test, definitely. Iacostas is wondering, are the subject tests part of the SAT? Are they the sections? No, they're totally, completely different tests that you sign up for completely separately. Is it worth taking the subject test if I'm majoring in that field? Ask S4990. Amazingly, no. Only if you are applying to a school that puts it as a requirement on their application. should you take the SAT 2 subject tests? Yeah, it's weird because those subject tests, they're just not that useful. You don't get college credit for them. You don't get anything for them except for you tick a box if a college application requires it. What would you suggest to prep for the SAT essay? That's a good question, guest. So it depends. If you're a Kaplan student, then I would recommend watching our 1-hour video on the SAT essay. You'll find it in the channel tab of your student page, and that will help you get prepared. Aside from that, I would use a prep book because basically there's like a certain template that you can use to outline your essay in advance, regardless of what the specific prompt ends up being. So if you have a good prep book, it'll teach you that template, and then you want to just practice applying it to a few example prompts. Where can you find help with subject tests? Good question, Yasmin. So my best advice there, your bookstore. Get a book on the subject tests. The subject tests are content tests. They are just memorizing content for the most part. So you just need a book and you need to cram all the stuff into your brain. Now, Iacostas asked a very interesting question. What are the differences between the SAT and the ACT? What would suit better for what person, math-oriented, reader-oriented? Great question, Iacostas. So the way that you got to think about it is like this. Each test is a percentile scored test, meaning your score is a reflection of what percent of people scored worse than you. So there's nothing better than to simply take a practice test of each and see which one gave you a higher percentile score. The scaled score, the scales are different for the two tests, but the scale does not really matter. It doesn't matter that the ACT is 1 to 36 and the SAT is at a 1600. Just take whatever your score is, look up the table online and convert it to a percentile. Whichever test you got a higher percentile on, that is the one that is better suited to you because that is the one that you do better against your competition on than on the other test. That being said, there is one major difference, which is that on the SAT, math is half your score. On the ACT, math is only a quarter of your score. So if you're a math person, you're probably going to prefer the SAT because it gives you more time on the reading and writing, and it makes math count for half your score. If you're more of a verbal person, you are perhaps going to be more inclined for the ACT because math is only a quarter of your score and you have less time for the reading portions. So if you're like a better verbal person, you can handle that and other people can't. The ACT has science on it, which, I don't want to underplay it because like you do need to have a good scientific brain or like a good brain for logic. But the science test has almost no questions that require any outside science knowledge. It is really a scientific reasoning test. So just to be clear, like I did not like science in school. It was the subject that I hated more than any other subject by a substantial margin. It was my least favorite subject. ACT science, not a problem. Love it. It's fun. It's great because it's not actually science. It's scientific reasoning. So that is something that you have to practice uniquely for the ACT because the SAT doesn't have anything remotely like it. Yuri's wondering, is it good to submit subject tests even if the score is not 750 in colleges? No. If you don't need it for colleges, you don't get anything whatsoever for taking it. All right, folks. Thank you so much for coming. It's been a pleasure working with you. I really appreciate the time that you gave us today. Have a lovely day. Good luck in your prep, and we hope to see you again soon. Take care, everybody.